Hi, welcome to Box on the Box Rock and Celluloid, Bot for short. I'm Edward Box. So today I'm going to be talking about 21st century horror films. So the 21st century has seen some great horror films, a great sort of growth in the amount of horror directors, and it's really been a genre that has yielded some really good works, but also horror films deliver films at a low to medium budget, and that's great for Hollywood because it means they can turn a profit. It's still like a really profitable thing, and it builds franchises. Going back to the past, just reading my notes here, 1930s you had the Universal horrors, of course, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein being the two classics there. Then you had in the 1940s the Val Lewton horrors like Curse of the Cat People. 1950s was a bit of a lull, and then you get Hammer coming out at the end of that, and then very much running the first part of the 60s. But apart from things like The Haunting and The Innocents, quite big budget horror ghost stories, it's really at the end of the 60s that the game changing really happens, because in 1968 you get George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, a low budget exploitation film that does really well and gives rise to that genre in the 70s with Wes Craven's Last House on the Left. Obviously it's not a zombie film, but the budget of the filmmaking, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. On the other hand, you get the first really big budget studio horror film that's a big success, which is Rosemary's Baby, directed by noted filmmaker Roman Polanski. From that you get The Exorcist and The Omen and other, obviously they're the two prime examples, but other attempts and other big budget horrors, before it kind of flips back at the end of the 70s with Halloween, giving rise to the slasher genre, Friday the 13th, and that comes perfectly in time with the rise of home video. And we'll have all seen the horror films we've got in our video shops. In the 80s, you get some new heroes, horror heroes like Freddy and Chucky coming out in the 80s. I think Chucky just about comes out in the 80s. Then the 90s is the postmodern self-reflection of Scream, and there's various retroactive reboots, like Halloween gets a reboot, and then moving into the noughties you will get remakes of those classic horrors, a remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so forth. So what are the great things of 20th century horror? I think early sort of influences or things that showed where things could go with a different style of horror is the film Ring series, film Ring at 1998. So at the end of the 90s into the very early noughties you had the Far East producing great horror films in Ring. There was The Grudge, Audition, very, very, very good, and with a different kind of atmosphere, a different kind of vibe, a different type of horror, not what I call bogeyman horror, more of a slow burn, more intelligent. I think people call it evolved horror, don't they? But I could be wrong with that. So those kind of stand out to me as being sort of signposts. But I'm not going to go through this in any particular order. I've just kind of put these into like a few kind of categories for the things that I think have been great this century. But starting off with folk horror or elements of folk horror. So what was strange about the folk horror genre, it didn't really exist until Mark Gatiss in his documentary on horror about 2010, I think that was, coined the phrase, and that was based on three British films: Witchfinder General, the Blood on Satan's Claw, and The Wicker Man. And then you start to get a spate of them. I remember like the first one I got on like a video on demand. I forget what it was called. Wakewood, that was it. But you good British ones. The two I like are Kill List and In the Earth. Kill List starts off as a Hitman thing, but it goes folk horror. In the Earth I think is underrated. Ben Wheatley as well, a good British director when he's doing stuff like that, not the Meg. Then you get Hereditary, which has some folky horror elements really, with The Witchery and Midsommar. Now I think Hereditary is quite controversial because it's a game of two halves, and to be honest I'm still not totally sure what I think about it, but the fact that I'm debating that shows that it's an interesting film. Midsommar, although a little too long, I think is quite fascinating. And of course what really started that American folk horror was The Witch, Robert Eggers, with Anya Taylor-Joy, Ralph Ineson. Great film. So there's some examples there. There's also some great ghost stories in the turn of the millennium. Guillermo del Toro's Devil's Backbone was creepy, but it managed to imbue emotion, and his use of the Spanish Civil War as a backdrop setting was really interesting, because obviously that's something we as Brits wouldn't be as aware of. He produced The Orphanage as well, directed by J. Bayona, which is a really good horror ghost story that manages to be emotional by the end. Also like The Others with Nicole Kidman, really creepy obviously probably doesn't reward as much on certain lists watching because of the ending, but still good. And then you got kind of weird, spooky things like The Babadook, which I suppose is Australian, Under the Shadow, the Iranian film, and a film called Session 9 is one worth checking out by Brad Anderson. They have to go to a mental asylum to remove asbestos, which is scary enough, but things get really weird. It's Josh Lucas in that. And the Scottish actor Peter, I can't remember his second name, but he's really good, you'll know what I mean. Okay, and then in the vampire genre, there's just one film that really stands out for me, and that's Let the Right One In, the Swedish film from 2008. And in actual fact, Hollywood did a good remake of this, Let Me In, which might have been 2010, 2012, which is perfectly decent. But I love the atmosphere of Let the Right One In, and it's really clever how it looks at the role of the vampires familiar. There's not many films do that. Salt and Hound of Dracula, there's one. But that's really good. Incredible atmosphere. The director wanted to do Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and then did a disastrous film called The Snowman with Michael Fassbender. He just disappeared. So it must have hit him hard. And some good Brit horrors. So it's weird, Britain, it was all Four Weddings and a Funeral and Guy Ritchie in the 90s, wasn't it? Danny Boyle. But the Brit horrors, obviously 28 Days Later would be one. Although it's American money, zombie film, doing a different spin on the zombie genre. Still the best 28 days film or 28 film by a long mile. But recent one, St Maud's, very good. Again, just a different take with mental illness. His House, which looks at sort of trauma of asylum seekers and something like what would happen in Rwanda. Really good. And a good one I've seen is Censor. So this time's Neil Malgar, and this actually deals with the video nasties of the set in 1985. So those of us who are old enough remember video nasties that were banned. And this kind of ends up like a weird film within a video nasty. It is very, very good. Check it out. And a weird little film, it's only 55 minutes long, is Host, which is centered around a Zoom meeting and paranormal activity. Really good. It's probably on iPlayer, which brings me to like found footage ones. Paranormal activity films, I'm not really fussed about. You've got The Conjuring and so on. They haven't done it for me, but I do think Wreck, the Spanish horror film, which was remade as Quarantine in America. There's 3 Wreck films. The first Wreck's really good. It's generally scary. It uses the found footage thing really well. Forget the name of that director, but very, very good. That's Spanish. And another film, technically it's a thriller, is Sleep Tight. If you've not seen that, the actor in that, I forget his name, but he's in a lot of Spanish top. He's like a Gora winning actor. If you've not seen, very Hitchcockian, but with a cool horror elements. That's more horror thriller. Sleep Tight's very good. Other films, American ones that kind of draw my attention. Early on was like, I've not seen it for ages, but Drag Me to Hell, Sam Raimi, bringing his brilliant mix of humour, and of course Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, which humour would be a big influence, and he has that ability to be scary but bring in the humour elements, and that's a really good one. And another one I enjoyed, American one recently, was The Late Night with the Devil. I really enjoy the actor in this. A lot of people criticise the ending of it, but I think it's on Shudder. Is it David Malchastian? I've mispronounced it, but he's in a new series of Dexter. He's got a really interesting presence. And then one which kind of came and went to the box office, but has got a really good following, of course, is Frank Darabont's The Mist. Probably the film with the most miserable ending ever. He changed the ending from Stephen King's book, and even Stephen King was like, actually, yeah, even I wouldn't have done that, and he's bested me. Really good, The Mist. Really kind of works as a kind of social commentary. And you've got to give Saw credit. I think one of the criticisms of the first Saw is sometimes I don't think the acting's great, but I think the guy, Tobin, I've forgotten his second name, is a really good actor. And I think the Saw films have that bad torture porn, as they call it, but the Jigsaw character is really interesting, and Saw is good, and it's got a really satisfying ending. Going back to British horror, the film that really I think is maybe the best Brit horror and might be one of my top choices for the mantle of 21st century horror, with Let the Right One In, is The Descent. Neil Marshall's The Descent. He did the film Dog Soldier in 2002, which is comedy horror. But with this, he did a great job. He got a group of women going caving, which was really interesting. That kind of made the dynamics interesting and kind of more shocking, the way things play out. the creatures are really creepy, really good design, but the claustrophobia was generally terrifying. Going caving is of no interest to me, and even less interest after I've seen that film. You've also had recent American horrors like It Follows. Film I couldn't totally get a grips with. I'll watch it again. I think that guy's doing another film, Under the Silver Lake, supposed to be good. But kind of interesting that weird sort of future they're in, or not. They've got that weird gizmo, haven't they? And that's given rise, recently an American horror auteur, I suppose you could use that word, or someone whose name has been pushed with the horror is Osgood Perkins. Now I'm forgetting the name of his film prior to Longlegs, but Longlegs came out, then he did The Monkey, and I saw a trailer for one of his films recently. Now I did like Longlegs, I don't think it was probably as good as some of the hype was, but I do think it's creepy, he knows how to do unsettling atmosphere, and his films don't follow a sort of typical pacing pattern. And something like The Monkey as well, it was quite kind of funny. Again, he's kind of doing the Sam Raimi humour thing. So he's an interesting filmmaker, and a filmmaker with like real tragedy in his life, real horror. His father was Anthony Perkins, famous of Psycho, of course. He passed away from complications from AIDS. And his mum was actually murdered in the September 11 attacks. Interesting fact. Get Out, Jordan Peele. I've got to say, I really like Get Out. I can't really be doing with them, or Nope. I can't be doing with those. Just couldn't get into them. But Get Out was really interesting. Some really interesting visuals. And again, that involved horror things, social horror. I think Mark Kermode's used that term. Just doing something different with the genre. And a new... the only new character in horror, obviously in the past we've had Michael Myers, we've had Freddy, Jason and so on. Terrifier, Art the Clown. Now, if you've not seen the Terrifier films, it's hard to say whether they're good films or not, but you have to put them into your sort of thoughts, because Art the Clown's like the first kind of horror character monster of the 21st century. There isn't really another one. These are horribly gory. It's just really horrible, and you think it can't get more horrible. I can't say I enjoy them as such, but I just find it interesting that this guy made a really low budget horror, which horror's always done that, and he's created this new monster. I suppose we got Pennywise from it, but Art the Clown's really serious. We've had a few remakes, I was talking about before. One of the interesting ones is a Suspiria remake, which, although it can never top the original, the director Luca Guadagnino, mispronounced it probably, really good, interesting director. He does something generally different with it. He changes the setting, he has a really horrific bit in it, and it's just got a different vibe, so it's become something legitimately self on its own. That's probably one of the most successful remakes I've seen. Just a weird little one as well to pick out is a film called The Invitation. Now, I think you'll find this, it might be on Netflix, or you might find it Now TV Prime, something like that. This is a film where the guy gets invited to a party. His ex-wife's there, and there's a guy who may or may not be some kind of cult leader or something. It's got a really unsettling atmosphere, but I really like the acting. The main actor, Logan Marshall Green, is really good in it, and it's got a great climax. Is it horror? Well, again, it's kind of more thriller. I don't know, it's unsettling, but it's worth checking out. And the final two I'm going to pick, now these are two brothers who direct these, I think they're Australian, Netflix, you may well have seen Talk to Me. So this is the film where they hold some kind of statue, hand off a statue or something, or, I don't know, clay hand, and then they kind of communicate with the dead. What's interesting about this, it just goes straight and it doesn't try to explain it. So typically with these kind of horror films, someone will find an artifact. Oh, what's this? Strange things start happening. And where I think it works is it's that idea that with teenagers, you don't always know what's going on. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know where they are. So it kind of just puts us straight into the teen world. This has got some shocking violence in, but it's really good. Again, it's unsettling, and it's got a strong climax. And their most recent film, Bring Her Back, is one of the best films this year. Again, a film that has unsettling atmosphere. It's really well shot. and it's generally disturbing with a great performance by Sally Hawkins. And that's the other thing with this. I think typically in the past with horror films, we haven't looked at horror films as being something where there's great acting. You've got people playing cool characters, but not great acting. Obviously, you'd be going back to The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby, but I think a film like Bring It Back, Late Night with the Devil, have really good acting. Let the Right One In, Censor, St Maud, the others I mentioned before. You know, these have really, really good performances in them. And there was another one I was going to pick out, and I can't think that's got a great performance. But anyway, that is something interesting. That you can have good caliber acting. Hereditary, sorry, yeah, Toni Collette, amazing. In these films, so that's something that's changed about horror. I think it's kind of classier. I think as well with the rise, you know, with equipment being cheaper and special effects being cheaper to do, you can get horror films looking really good with posher cinematography, better acting, better effects, which helps you create more unsettling atmosphere. And I think directors can be given more of a free rein, because there's not budget busting, so they don't need to make as much money, or they can afford to fail more, so to speak. Okay, that's my little take on 21st century horror. I hope you enjoyed that. Remember, share and subscribe.